Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. We're going to look at an older paper, the Supplementary of 2017. They are still good practice. They only consist of 3 questions, so for grade 11s and 12s there's no database questions in these. But the questions are a bit longer, so they're actually excellent practice for your exams. In the first button, we have to do some validation. So we are supposed to display a message in a label, but only if the user entered valid information. The name and surname is entered in the one edit box, and it has to have at least one space. And then the ID number is also entered. And they explain here that you need to test if they have entered anything. There's an asterisk next to it, so you have to complete that field. And if they did enter it, that the ID number consists of 13 characters. But you have to display individual messages. My first thought was to just do it all in one if statement. Can't do that because we have to display a message specific to the error that occurred. So you'll see there is our valid input, and then here are the 3 messages relating to the different errors that the user made. Just a reminder, when we have to display a message using a dialog box, they just mean you have to use a show message. Press pause and try it yourself. I've used a Boolean variable bValid to keep track of whether this is valid input. There's the input from the user. We had to test if there is at least one space. So if the pos of the space in this variable returns a 0, it means they didn't enter a space. And I'm displaying a message and I'm setting bValid to false here. This is to initialize bValid. Don't make it true again. It will then, if there were no errors, it will stay true. So inside of these if statements, I'm just changing them to false. Let me highlight it so that you can see properly. Then the next bit was that they had to enter something in the edit box. This is called a presence check. So I'm testing if they entered something in the edit box. There's no space between those 2 single inverted commas. If it's empty, then I'm displaying a message and I'm setting bValid to false. If there was something entered, I then store the ID in a string. Remember, we store IDs and cell phone numbers as string, as they can start with 0. And I'm storing the ID there as a string, and I'm testing the length of the ID. If the ID's length is not equal to 13, make sure you don't say greater than or less than, but that you say not equal to. Then I'm just changing bValid to false and also displaying a message. So right at the end here, if bValid is still true, remember our if statements will by default test if a Boolean variable or function is true. So we can add bValid is equal to true, but these 2 if statements will do the same thing. Then I'm just going to make that label visible by changing the visible property to true. You should test for all of the examples of output here, just to make sure all your messages are working correctly. Instead of reading the first part of the next button to you, these are actually 2 buttons with images on them. And what they're saying is that if you click on this one, it should change that label there to bold. And when you click on this one needs to be bold, but you need to take the bold away there. They've also given a global variable type card, and you had to assign a code to type card depending on which button they clicked on. So for the one button it was DI, and for the other one it was CH. You clicked on the charity one, and DI was for the discount button. Remember always to read the notes. I know some people skip over them, but this is where they explain to you that if the one is bold, the other one should not be bold. Press pause and try it yourself. Now that I look at the code, I see that it is not a button, even though it said button click. It's actually images under which you are coding, but they work the same as clicking on a button. So to change the font to bold, you have to use the label name. I'm in the image donation, and I'm changing label donations, font.style to important is that you have square brackets and then FS bold. To then clear your image discount from bold, it's the same code for the label now, this time discount, but inside of the square brackets you just put nothing. And then the global variable type card needed a value. For donations it was CH for charity, and then in the image discount you're kind of just doing the opposite with the labels, and type card there would be assigned to DI. In the next button we need to use that global variable to determine the discount. So if DI was stored in that variable, a 1.5% discount must be granted. If they clicked on the donation image, then a 3 Rand donation must be given to a charity for every 100 Rand, and very important, or part of 100 Rand spent. That means that if they spend 200 Rand, 6 Rand will be donated. But if they spend 201 Rand, 9 Rand will be donated. You have to then also display a message describing the benefit granted depending on the type of loyalty card. And here are some examples. Maybe you want to press pause and just try it yourself first, and then I'll show you examples of output. Here's an example for clicking on the discount image first, and the purchase amount was 1,200 Rand. This should be your output. They do tell us here to display this discount as a currency with 2 decimal values or decimal digits, so make sure yours does that as well. And here's the example if the charity or the donation image was clicked first for an amount of 230 Rand, and then an amount of 9 Rand must be donated. So in this button here, I'm getting the input from the user. I have to use an if statement for the type card because I am using a string variable here, so I can't use a case statement. Using a case statement would be possible if you just square brackets 1 there and then test for D or C, but I've used my if statement with a DI. And here I'm calculating the discount of 1.5%, so times by 1.5 and divide by 100. And then in the edit box.text property, I'm displaying the label. There's an extra N. By the way, if you do this, you don't have to go back and fix it because we do not mark you on spelling errors. So it's okay to have the extra N in there. But what was important is that this discount that you calculated just now is now displayed as a currency with 2 decimal places. If it wasn't DI, then the type card must be the charity one. So here we are donating 100 Rand. For every 100 Rand, we're donating 3 Rand. So important is that this here, when it's calculated, that you seal the amount. Remember, seal for sealing, rounding the value up. If the amount was 200, this will give me 2. 2 times 3 would be 6. If this amount was 201, I'll seal that answer and that would give me 3, and 3 times 3 would be 9. And then I just display here the label and then the amount donated also as a currency with 2 decimal places. Important that you add this last bit of the label as well. You will see for the display I've coded over 2 lines. You do not have to do this. This is just so that you guys can see on the screen. So this and that can all be in one long line. Just remember when you're testing your program for question 1.3, you do need to click on one of these images first before you now enter that amount. I think it was 1,200. And then to test the other one, you would have to click on this and change that to 230 before you click on button 1.3. Before you read this question, the question for 1.4 has 3 separate edit boxes for the output, as explained in the different parts of the question that I'll show you now. Part 1 is displayed in the first edit box, and this one will consist of either the letter B or P, depending on whether they selected the checkbox or not. And then it will be followed by the first 3 digits of the customer's ID number. Maybe you want to press pause and just try it. Then part 2, there is a string global constant declared for you, char string, that contains 10 characters, and it has been supplied for you, and they contain these values here, where the first character is for digit number 0 of the ID number. You'll see they refer to the last digit of the ID number. So if the last number in the ID number is a 0, you want to display the 0 as well as the exclamation mark. If it was a 1, you'll display the @ and so on. Here's the full explanation, and then they also give you an example here. So 4 is the last digit, and then I'll display 4 as well as the percentage sign, because that represents 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Take note, it's in position 5. Maybe you want to press pause and just try this part before we continue. And all they're doing here is displaying that global variable, DI or CH, in the last edit box, depending on which image they clicked on. To test your program, you do need to click on the button question 1.1 with input from the user, as well as on question 1.2. So in this case, I have John Smith there. Just as a tip, what I do is I enter default values in the text property here of the Object Inspector, so that I do not have to continue to enter code while I'm testing my program. You're going to test it once anyway. Just type it in the text property. You are allowed to do that. If you have to run it again, you don't have to type all of that again. You can just click on the buttons. So to test question 1.4, you need to click on 1.1, and then this one was a DI, so that means no, it's not that, it's a discount. And then they wanted you to select a business card, so click on the checkbox and then click on question 1.4, and that should be your output. So here I've just tested if the .check property is true. Remember, we don't have to add the equals to true, but you can if you want to. Reason is I know that the check property is a Boolean property, and therefore my if statement will by default check if it is true. And I have just initialized S customer ID here, or the code with a B. If it's unchecked, then it's a P. And added to that, I need to copy out the first 3 digits of the ID number. That's why it's important that you click on button 1.1 first, so that it stores it in SID, which should be global. So here I have the output to the text property of either B or P, and then the first 3 characters copying from 1 for 3 characters from the ID number. For the next part, we need to get hold of the last number of the ID, the 13th digit, and we need it as an integer, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use ilast plus 1 to extract the correct character from the string given. Remember, this character here is character number 0, so for that reason I'm adding 1 to it. Remember, strings start with the first digit or character would be in position 1. So if it extracts a 0, plus 1 will extract, that's why I'm using the square brackets there, from the string, the first character. I also need to display the 13th character. It was a string, so I can just use my square brackets 13 as I did up there, and added to that this constant variable, square brackets, the last digit plus 1 to get the correct position for that digit. And then finally, in the third part or the third edit box, all I had to do is display that global variable type card. Please remember to leave some comments if you have any questions or something else that you would like me to explain. And for more explanations and practice for question 1 of your final grade 12 paper, go to Dandelion Delphi Book 1. Thank you everyone for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. Hope to see you soon.